When you hear the word indigenous, what do you think of? A lot of you are going to think about chiefs and headdresses because these are stereotypes that have been referenced a lot in the media. But what the media doesn't cover is how indigenous people are preserving their culture through artwork. Artwork has been used for a long time as a mean of communications and also specifically in terms of political and protest art, it's been used as a mean of power, for gaining power and strength. And to quote Boris Groys, an art history professor from NYU, art has its own power in the world and is as much of a force in the power play of global politics today as it once was in the arena of Cold War politics. As a fine arts student myself, I've been taught time and time again the importance of breaking down an artwork and its impact on society and culture. Learning about Indigenous art, history, and knowledge will help you understand how important it is to preserve it, not only for these people themselves, but also for the world at large. The first thing that we're going to cover in this speech is the general history of Indigenous people. Then we're going to cover Indigenous knowledge and and finally, how all those things tie together in Indigenous artwork and how it affects politics at large. First off, let's give some background about the history of Indigenous people. So, when the Europeans arrived at Indigenous civilizations, the majority of them didn't come in peace. They came to colonize the people in the land. And throughout the colonization, they stripped these people of their culture and their religion and forced them to follow Christianity and European customs. And in the worst cases, a lot of indigenous people died, and with them died their knowledge. And even worse cases are that where whole communities and civilizations were destroyed, such as the Inca Empire, which was destroyed by the Spanish, um, and thus those people never going to come back for permanently gone. We can only learn through them through archaeology. And Native Americans, the Trail of Tears, we've lost a lot of people due to that. Displacement also caused these people to die because with the loss of their environment, which their culture is surrounded by, they don't know how to survive in these new environments. And so culture dies with the people because um, these people spread their lessons through word of mouth. And this leads to the subject of Indigenous knowledge. So through the death of these Indigenous people, we see a death of their culture. Their culture dies out and their knowledge dies out. And like I mentioned earlier, knowledge and culture is tied to the land. And Polynesians, for example, they are raised in a tropical environment. They are based off the ocean. They are sailors. If you were to place them in Idaho, they would completely die out because they don't know how to survive in a mountain environment. Um, they also, even if they're survived, their culture would die out because there would be no need for sailing, for information on sailing and such. Consequently, this leads to the importance of Indigenous art because each different culture equals a different lens and view that we can, um, point of view that we can see the world through and gives insight. And so, taking back their power and their culture through artwork allows these insights to come back and really let the world flourish. And an article according in an article from Aboriginal Art and Protection of Indigenous Cultural Rights, in the 1988 report of the review committee, retail sales for Aboriginal art and crafts were said to be at about 18.5 million, that of which 7 million came back to the communities and the creators. And this is so significant because this is a means um, of work and of financial support which these people have, and that helps maintain their communities, and not only that, helps me preserve their culture and spread awareness about their culture and their art and their knowledge. And in an article written by The Guardian that's titled Beyond the Dot: How Indigenous Artists Are Shaking Off Stereotypes, it discusses how reoccurring problems with modernized colonization, in which Indigenous motifs and cultural artifacts are being appropriated by larger companies within the industry without permission and thus leaving the original artist without profit. So what's happening here is that the artists are creating protest art in retaliation to the current situation, and they're also taking legislative measures in which they will protect their culture and their art. And according to the article, Queensland MP Bob Katter has taken up the cause, putting up a private member's bill before Parliament that seeks to amend consumer law to ensure that the profits of Indigenous art and artifacts go back to Indigenous communities. So, in conclusion, it just goes to show that Indigenous artwork in particular is so crucial to the preservation of not only the Indigenous culture, but also to the preservation of communities at large.